Hi, welcome back to the channel. I'm Michelle, and today I'm going to be doing a core knowledge pros and cons for you. Now, if you're new here, I have a 10-year-old daughter and a 6-year-old daughter. Homeschooling them both. We started homeschooling my oldest in 3rd grade. She's now in 4th grade. My youngest has been homeschooled since pre-K, kindergarten, is now in 1st. Now, my experience with core knowledge, I want to start with that, is we have done science from K to 5th grade science units. We have done history and geography, and I'm doing language arts with my 6-year-old. So that is kind of our experience. We've used it for the last 2 years. So I'm going to share the things that I like about it and the things that I don't. And of course, this is my perspective on it. Some of my pros might be some cons to you, and that's completely fine, but I kind of want to get a layout of what I think about this curriculum, because I think it is a wonderful option for homeschoolers, and I kind of want to dispel some of the misconceptions about core knowledge. So first thing I'm going to do is link down below. It's a website called Homeschool Work Plans, which details how to kind of work through core knowledge. It details the different sections of core knowledge. It gives you video instructions. It's a very well put together program that if you're confused by core knowledge, this will really help, how you implement it and all that. So I also have videos on my channel about how I use science, how I plan, how I prep, all that. You can check those out if you want. So let's get into the list. So I'm going to start with my positives first, because it's going to be a long list. I have a feeling it's going to be a longer video. And then I'll get into my negatives. So I think the first positive of core knowledge up front is it's completely free. It's a downloadable curriculum you can use online. You can choose to print it. You can choose to buy physical copies of it if you would like. You can choose to just use a tablet and go from there. Whatever works for you and your budget. I think some people see the aspect of it being free as a negative. Like, how good can it really be if it's completely free? Well, I think to answer this question, you really need to go into why the Core Knowledge Foundation was founded, their principles behind it, maybe read some E.D. Hirsch, the founder of Core Knowledge, has books he's written about education, and I've read one of them, I've read almost all of them except his newest one, but it goes into the idea of contextual knowledge is very important when learning, and sometimes it can be more important, and the example they give is they did studies on, reading in children and reading comprehension and their ability to take information and be able to process that and things like that. And looking at, 2 different groups of people, one group of children who were struggling in reading and another group of children that were perceived as, being really good readers and things like that. And they were given passages and they were asked to answer questions on those passages. The passage was a story that took place in a baseball game, and what they found is the kids, even though they were remedial readers or struggling readers, they would score higher than those that were doing really well in reading. And why? Because they had a better understanding of baseball in general, the game. So the story made more sense because they could connect it to something they already knew. And that's kind of the whole point of core knowledge, is that you're building upon knowledge year after year, so you're able to connect it, because if you're able to connect it to information you already know, it's going to be stored more permanently in your brain, and it's going to be easier for you to access and understand it. So that is kind of the whole foundational reason behind core knowledge. And it's free, yes, but it is extremely well written. It is well researched. So I would don't let the fact that it's free scare you away. I think that's something that some people are concerned about, that how good quality can it be? It is. It's very good quality. And frankly, it's a lot better quality out there than a lot of the homeschooling curriculum I've seen come out or has been out for a while. Next thing that I think is a pro is it has not only standards, but it has things like next generation science standards. And some people think that is a negative thing. Things like Common Core or having any type of standardized, your child should know this at this age, is a negative thing. Again, I think this is a positive. One thing that's positive about it is, since it aligns with next generation science standards, core knowledge updates routinely. Like they just did a major update in all their curriculum. So things like science and history, you're going to be getting more relevant information that is to today. If you're taking science curriculum that was written 10 years ago, there's going to be a big difference between the information that you're given. Same thing with history, different perspectives and things like that. You're given more information because it's updated and more recent. So I think that's a positive in itself that core knowledge does update itself. But back to next generation science standards. Why is that important? Not only is it making sure children are covering certain basics of science, which are important, but also that they're able to take the information and do critical thinking with it, not just regurgitate information, which I think is funny because that a lot of people see core knowledge as a public school curriculum because it is available to public and private schools as well as homeschoolers. That it's a textbook that we saw in the 90s that was very basic and, words highlighted and just regurgitation of information. That is not what it is. A lot of core knowledge is discussion based. Yes, it's giving you this rich contextual knowledge of the subject or what's going on, and it's opening you up to discussion. And it talks about different types of, even in the teacher guide, it'll tell you what types of questions you're asking. Are they evaluative? Are they inferential? Things like that. So I think that's really a positive, and because it does follow things like next generation science standards, you're able to bring in other resources if you feel necessary, like Generation Genius follows next generation science standards. So with that, you can bring in Generation Genius videos into your lesson plans for core knowledge, and they meld very well together. There are a lot of supplements that follow next generation science standards that you can pull from. I know Lakeshore Learning makes kits based on the age level of next generation science kits. So 4th grade would have this kit that goes with it. So you can do something as easy as that. So I think that's really important. And to the public school aspect, it goes into so much more depth, and it's not about the regurgitation. I went through public school my entire life. My oldest daughter did public school, K through 2nd grade. She covered things in core knowledge that I guarantee were not even close to being covered in public school, and the depth at which it's done is much, much better. So I think it's available to public schools, but that doesn't mean it's a negative, if that makes sense. Next is, I like that it is done by age level. So there's kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd, 4th for, history, geography, for science, for math, or for language arts. And why is that important? A lot of things like history and science I see are often wide age ranges. So something K through 3rd or K through 5th. What is the problem with that? There's a big difference between what a kindergartner can do and what a 3rd grader can do. And does this mean you have to adhere to the level that your child is at? Absolutely not. For example, we did a human body study this summer and early into this last year's fall, and we went all the way from the K human body unit all the way up to 5th grade human body unit. So it covered a span that was really great for my 6-year-old and more mature and more information for my 10-year-old. So it's really nice that you can, even though it's leveled, you don't have to choose that level for your child. But what's nice about those levels is it's specifically giving enough information for that age to not be overwhelming to the child. And it's written to the child. The readers are written to the child so that they can understand. Because again, core knowledge is based on things like research and how children think and learn. There's a lot of work that's gone into core knowledge that I don't think a lot of people understand or respect, that they are taking these things into account when they're writing their curriculum. So because it's aged, it's just at that right level. Or if your child's above or below, you can adjust to that it's enough information, it's not overwhelming, and it's things that they are completely capable of doing at that age. Next is, I like that it's almost like a unit study. So they have, like I said before, we did K through 5th grade health. Every year in science, there's a unit that covers the human body. So I was just able to take every human body unit from K through 5th and go through all of them? Do they repeat the information from year to year? Some of it, I would say no, it doesn't, because it's building upon each other. So it's going to take what you learned about the digestive system and go deeper and learn more about that. Body systems, like you'll start with in the kindergarten level learning about body systems, and then you'll get into more specific body systems and their functions, and so on and so on. And why is that really helpful? Well, it worked well for us because we learned how the body worked, the systems, specific body parts, organs, things like that, and led us all the way into puberty and reproduction, which my kids had a really good understanding of how the bodily systems work and how they work together, and how that affects our bodies during things like puberty and the changes we go. So again, having that unit study approach, you could take anything from any level you want and go with it. You don't have to do a previous level to understand it. You don't have to know anything. There is a part that tells in the teacher guide for a unit, this is some basic information that would be helpful to know before you start this unit, which is helpful if you want to do some things before, especially when you get into the upper grades. But you can pull whatever you want. If you want to do a literature-based study, pull that. If you want to do just habitats, pull that. So you can use it completely as a unit study if you want. You do not have to follow this and then this and then this. You can use whatever you want. I love that core knowledge covers multiple subjects within itself. So for example, I'm doing core knowledge language arts first grade with my 6-year-old. And within this we have covered fables, which gets into different, not just story elements, but cultures around the world. We talked about Cinderella from different cultures and how that's written, Little Red Riding Hood. We've talked about astronomy, the human body, earth science, and we talk about art, and all these aspects are brought into the units. For example, when we've done geography, we did a third grade geography all last year with my oldest and my 6-year-old. It brought in artist study, and I believe we did a Monet study, and it brings in these other elements, and they completely make sense and tie into what you're learning about. So I remember a while back someone commented on the video that they felt bad that the only thing they were doing was core knowledge. Well, I have all these other things going on. The great thing about core knowledge is you're not just doing that specific thing. It's bringing in aspects from all these different areas into this core curriculum, hence the name. So you're covering multiple avenues with one curriculum, which is a great thing. Next would be positive for me is that it's secular and comes from a non-biased point of view. So I've talked about this before when you're talking about things, especially like history. I prefer secular mindset because it is, religion plays a big part into how events happen, how things were formed. Same thing with science. I prefer a secular point of view. I want, facts, which, there are educational guesses in science. I completely understand that. But I want to give my kids research-based ideas and thoughts when it comes to science. And I think that it's important that, especially when we're talking about bias. Now, for example, core knowledge is history, the most woke, culturally diverse curriculum you're going to find? No. But is it so much better than most of what's out there? Yes. So I've only done history and geography, like I said, for 3rd grade and for 1st grade. So I can't talk about to the higher levels. I fully plan on implementing their U.S. history next year with my oldest, so I can give more of how they really handled that aspect of it. From everything I've used, though, it's done very respectfully. It does make an effort to talk about other perspectives. It does not skew certain cultures in a negative light. A lot of things like American history, you're talking about, they don't acknowledge that this was Native American land. Core knowledge does that. It does acknowledge those things. It does talk about more difficult subjects in an age-appropriate way. So I think it's doing a lot better than a lot of curriculums out there, but it is going to be the most culturally diverse, multiple perspective. No, I think there are curriculums, and I will talk more about that when I talk about what I'm using for 5th grade, but I think it does a really good job, and the fact that it's based on many contributors, I think, is really important. I know a lot of these homeschool curriculums are, if they're written by one person, I don't think that's a good idea, especially when you're talking about things like science and history. You want multiple contributors to your research or your information you're giving, because that's how you're going to get multiple perspectives and ideas and not deal with things like biases. So I think it's important that core knowledge has those things. Another pro is core knowledge doesn't require extra things. A lot of the homeschool curriculums out there, they will give you the curriculum, but you have to go out and buy the spines. And that can get pricey, or the extra books, it can get pricey. Core knowledge has a teacher guide and a student reader for most of their curriculum, at least what I've used. So for example, this is a student reader that I bought for 3rd grade. And again, I have a flip through where I talk about how I use science and things like that. But that's all. I no longer buy the physical copies, and in fact, I don't think you can buy the physical copies for this level anymore because they revamped their curriculum. But what I do now is I just take my Samsung tablet, and the teacher guide is on my tablet, as you can see here. The teacher guide is here, so I just read from here. And then my kids, instead of using these readers on their Amazon Fire tablet, I just download the readers there, and they flip through there or read from there when necessary. So we did originally get the books because I am definitely more of a paper type person, so I prefer to have books, but you don't have to print if you don't want to. I don't. The only thing I print is the worksheets that go with the unit, which I'll get to in a little bit, but there's no extra books that you need to get. This is it. And the fact that it's completely free and you don't need extra trade books unless you want to is great. It's really budget friendly, but still quality information. For example, the science, it doesn't have weird things that you're going to have to go out and search for or buy from Amazon or a science supply homeschool store. It's everyday things you will have on hand. The only thing, the 2 years that I had to go out and buy that I didn't have was magnetic tape that we were doing for, I believe it was forces, when we were learning about the forces. Push and pull type things. I bought a little thing of magnetic tape to do one of the experiments for. Again, you could choose not to do that experiment if you don't want to buy it, but it's very household type things that aren't going to require a lot of money or you're looking for weird things. Next is assessments. Core Knowledge provides assessment opportunities within their units. And again, this could be positive or negative to some people. I think it's important that, one, I know that my children are understanding the information through these assessments. Two, it's great if you're one of those people that have to keep something like a portfolio. It is helpful to have those to show what your child knows. And a lot of the times, it can, for my 1st grader, we'll do an assessment at the end of her language arts unit, and we'll just do it orally. She doesn't have to write it. They do have, what I like about the core knowledge assessments in the younger grades is it's done by pictures, so they don't have to write. They can just circle the correct answer. You ask them a question, and they circle the correct answer in picture form, which is nice. So it's done, again, at that age level, but it gives you an opportunity to see what they learned and to review, which I think is an important skill to be able to take the information you've learned and be able to, I know a lot of people are into things like dictation, so you kind of explain what was in it, but it's an important thing to be able to write down what you learned. I think that's just a basic skill you're going to be using the rest of your life, especially if you go into any type of higher learning. You're going to be able to have to take information that you've learned and be able to write it down or summarize it. So I like that it provides those opportunities. So I briefly mentioned this before, but on every core knowledge unit, at the very end, it will tell you the exact contributors to that unit, the editors, the graphics, where everything is coming from. So why is that important? One, I've talked about how I think it's important to have multiple sources when you're getting information. Two, they're completely upfront about where they're getting their information from, which a lot of information out there is, written by one person, or it's a homeschool parent putting out curriculum, which I don't have anything against homeschool parents putting out curriculum, but if I'm not an expert in the field I'm teaching, I expect to pull resources from people who are experts in the field, because I don't know necessarily if something could be right or wrong, especially when we're talking about higher levels of science. I took, science in high school and all that, but that doesn't make me remember it 15, 20 years ago. So it's nice to know that the information you're getting is well researched and based on fact, and they're completely transparent about where they get their information from. One of the things I like about the science units is they have these little sections where I believe it's called Know More. So it's written specifically to the teacher, and it tells you more specifically on that subject, or it gives you certain links or articles to go to learn more about that subject, so you as a educator are more prepared to teach that specific topic or subject. So I really enjoyed that. I like that core knowledge is scripted. It literally, for example, first grade core knowledge language arts, they look at a picture, everything is scripted. They even have little things on the side. Again, check my day in the life where I go through this with my 6-year-old. But the questions are there for you to ask, and they're not just basic comprehension questions. It's pulling out that information and getting them to think more deeply about what the information is saying. So I like that. The last pro I have is it provides sample lesson plans. So every teacher guide will start with lesson plans, and they'll give you an idea of if you did science every day. I think that's kind of how it's written out. And then they'll give you a blank lesson plan. So for example, I can pull out. So this is an example of a blank lesson plan that I filled out. We do science 2 days a week. Doing science 2 days a week, we are able to finish so far almost all of I think there's 4 science units in a year. Last year we finished 3, so we're finishing the 4th one right now. So I just go through, and they're color-coded, day 1, day 2, and I will write any materials I need above for that lesson. So again, this is just how my brain works. So that is how nice you can pull ideas from the lesson plan. Each next lesson, so lesson 7, lesson 8, will give you an overview of what you're going to cover if you just want to quickly jot that down. But I like that it gives you lesson plan templates if you want to make yourself, or lesson plans if you want to look at how it's done before. But I think it does provide, like I said, really quality curriculum, and it's building on multiple skills. So the example I wanted to give is we are currently doing weather and climate. So for this unit, we started learning the first thing we learned was what is weather, what is climate, how are they different. Then we learned about meteorologists, how they work, and one of the great things about core knowledge is they have a lot of online resources for every unit, as well as trade books for every single unit. So if you're one of those people that like to bring in a lot of living books or more information, there's like a list of 21 books for every single unit you're going to go through that give you an idea of if you want to go farther, this is what you could do. So we learned about meteorologists. We watched a video about a day in the life of meteorologists, things like that. I shared this before. We learned how meteorologists measure weather, the instruments they use. We made a weather vane. We did a chart where we took the date, and every day we measured the wind direction and the wind speed that we were going to then learn how to take that information and analyze weather patterns. So why is that information important to know? How do meteorologists and scientists use data to learn about patterns and predictions? And then we took it a step farther, again, building upon that knowledge So what we did last week is we looked at actual physical weather data. So we looked at the seasons, temperature, and precipitation, the highs and lows. We went through. My 10-year-old graphed the highs and lows for each of that. So she was able to analyze the data and then graph the data. And then she was able to analyze the data and make predictions about what she would predict the weather to be based on that data. So that's, I think, a perfect example of core knowledge just building upon itself, introducing you to a topic, letting you explore it, giving you more information, giving you the opportunity to analyze and create your own predictions. So I think that's wonderful. Now let's go into the cons of core knowledge. The first one is, it is not an open and go curriculum. This is something you will have to prep. Like I said before, I load the teacher guide onto my tablet, the student reader is on my kid's tablet, but that does not mean I don't have to prep things. I've talked about this before when I do my 6 weeks on, 1 week off, and that is what I do, and that is how I make core knowledge open and go, is I go through and I read. Now, I don't read every single part of the lesson. That would be a lot of time consuming, but I look over at those overviews of what information I will have to know. If I know we're starting a new unit, like weather and climate, I will print out all the necessary handouts for that unit. And I will go through and I will write down any supplements I want to do. Sometimes I add a Generation Genius video. Sometimes it's a Magic School Bus video. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. I will look over the trade book list, see if there's anything my library has or if I want to add anything to it. So you can make it as much as you want, or you can just do the basics. Core knowledge offers a great foundation and spine to branch off to all these other areas. Like I said, next year we're going to be using the U.S. history as a spine, but bringing in more perspectives to it. So it is not a open and go curriculum. It's things you will have to at least read ahead or prep a little bit. So like I said, I just print out, this is my 6-year-old's language arts, I print out the handouts in that week I have off, so it's all ready to go. I can just grab it as we go. Again, the lesson planning is already done. I think it's interesting that people see this type of prep work as a negative, because I think it's interesting that so you're not an expert in what you're teaching. At least most of us aren't. So for example, science, I'm not an expert in science. I took basic science. Don't remember a lot of it. So I expect to be able to use resources that know what they're talking about or well researched, right? I feel like a lot of homeschoolers don't want to put the effort forward in doing this kind of stuff, but you're not an expert in this field. You don't necessarily know what you're talking about. So you should be able to pull resources that are giving you these answers and guiding you through this, and not just, okay, read this paragraph and read a DK book about it. I don't think that is, in my opinion, enough information. I think lesson planning, being able to learn more things for yourself and being able to teach is important. Having that structure is very important. That systematic structure, which I think is seen as a negative, that it's very public schooly, which I think is one of the cons, is a lot of people think it's traditional or public school, but it's completely adaptable to homeschool. For example, the thing I showed you where they analyzed data, the next step of it was the last step was they looked at data for their region, and then they were supposed to give a recommendation on an outdoor party for the school, because again, it's written in a school setting, and write a letter to the principal saying this is their recommendation of when to hold the carnival based on their weather predictions. It's so easy to change. I just changed, okay, we're going to be having an outdoor carnival for Sunday school. We're having an outdoor carnival for co-op, or the library's hosting an outdoor carnival. Changing one word isn't hard. That's not hard to adapt it. And then instead of writing a letter to the principal, I had her just do a presentation to me about why she would use this information, how she used the data she did to come up with the information she did, and give me a presentation on why this would be the best time. It is so easy to adapt it to a homeschool setting, but does it take a little bit of work? Yes, and I think so many people are turned away from core knowledge because it requires you to actually do something as a homeschooler, which apparently a lot of people don't like to. They want to be able to just open it and go without having any knowledge or understanding of the subject. So that has always confused me, why in-depth work is considered a negative when it really just means you're well-researched and well-prepared to do it. So again, that is a negative some people see. I don't see it as prep work as a negative, but it is something you can't just open and read. Next, some of the online resources, the links do not work. Again, we've used it for 2 years. I have maybe 5 links haven't worked, or some of them were a National Geographic link where you had to be a National Geographic member in order to view the link. So there are a few links that didn't work or were no longer in service. That is one negative. One thing is you can no longer buy the hard copies of these. They stopped selling them. Technically, you could still get them through the website Amplify, but I guess it's more complicated now than it was before. And they did, I will say this, they let you know ahead of time that they were discontinuing selling these online through their website. They're now sold through something else. And plenty of time if you wanted to buy anything like that, but you can no longer get the hard copies of the first edition stuff. The newer stuff they're coming out, for example, science and history and things like that, like US history, I think you can get hard copies of that stuff now, but the older things, they're no longer having the physical copies if that's not something, if you're a physical copy type person. The last one is obviously you have to have some way to use it. So if you don't have like an eco tank, you don't have a printer that can handle a lot, that would be an issue. If you don't have a tablet or a computer to work from, that could be an issue for using this curriculum, because getting a hold of some of the readers and student or teacher guides would be difficult at that point. So you have to have some kind of, obviously, internet access and computer or something to use it for. That would be the negatives I see. So I have a feeling it's going to be a very long video, but if you have any questions specifically about core knowledge, or would like to see me talk about something specific in core knowledge, let me know below. If not, thank you for watching.